Happy NBA Draft Day. You're watching the Lakers Report by Chat Sports. I'm Chase Senior, and right now in the lead up to the NBA Draft, just a couple of hours away as we record this on Thursday morning, the Lakers don't have any selections in the 2022 NBA Draft, but there's been a lot of chatter, and Rob Pelinka has admitted that he's looked into and thought about the possibility of buying a second-round pick. So the point of today's show, going to do our due diligence, scout some players who the Lakers could target if and when they buy a second-round pick. Before we start to take a look at these player evaluations and the players who could be available for Los Angeles, if you want the Lakers to make a pick tonight, like me, then hit that thumbs up icon and like the video. I want to see this Lakers roster change a little bit, bring in some youth, but also try to compete in the present with LeBron James and Anthony Davis, so I'm going to go ahead and hit that thumbs up icon. We first start off by taking a look at the Lakers team needs. And last year they had the oldest roster in the history of the league, and there are going to be some monumental changes with Darvin Ham collaborating with Rob Pelinka. We want to see more playmakers on both ends come to Los Angeles, especially some modern-day 3-and-D guys. They didn't really have knockdown shooters on this team last year, although they generated, when you look at the analytics, some of the most open three-point looks. Ideally, you find a way to identify a center who can shoot a little bit and space the floor. But then going back to my previous point, and my main point here that I've been talking about for weeks now, depth as well as youth, because there are some expensive pieces on this roster, so you don't have a lot of financial wiggle room, but also some older players on this team. You need to give the Lakers an influx of talent. Here are the teams with multiple second-round picks. If you've seen this list, we're going to go through it again. If you haven't, we'll keep you up to date and in the know with what the Lakers do, and we're just trying to show you that there are opportunities for the Lakers to buy a second-round selection. Pacers have 2 picks, Magic 2, Blazers 2, Kings have 2. A couple of these are really advantageous and really appealing if you ask me. Cavaliers have 3. Timberwolves are in the trifecta category as well. Then the Pelicans and Warriors with 2 picks, all in the second round. Do you think the Lakers will make a pick in the NBA draft? I'm fielding all of your responses in the comment section right now. This is actually going to be the pinned comment on today's video. So if you get hit with that YouTube ad break, use it to your advantage. Scroll on down and get your votes in. Give me a Y for yes or an N for no. We're going to kind of segment this in draft targets in the 30s and then work our way throughout the second round of the draft. So we start off here with some possible selections in the 30s. Jake LaRavia out of Wake Forest. He's been climbing up some draft boards. This is a player who has really nice versatility to his game on both ends of the floor. I think he can impact games and be a little bit of a better shooter as compared to a guy like Kyle Anderson, but they do remind me of one another with the length, with the size, and their basketball IQ and how they can impact the game in a variety of ways. From LaRavia to Caleb Houstan out of Michigan. Another really solid player here. And if you get it right, if you hit on him, I think over time he can develop into a pretty solid player. Will he have a role on an NBA roster? Will he go down to the G League? We'll see how he performs in NBA Summer League. Wendell Moore Jr., really good player for the Duke Blue Devils last year. And this is a Duke team that I think we're going to look back on in a couple of years and say, my goodness, that roster in Coach K's final season was littered with professional talent. And because it's stacked with professional talent, Keels, Banchero, A.J. Griffin, a couple of really good players on that team. Mark Williams, another one. A guy like Wendell Moore was overshadowed and overlooked. 13 points per game and knocked down about 41% of his three-point shots. You get him in the 30s, that's excellent value because he has a role on an NBA roster, because he can knock down the three ball and defend. David Roddy out of Colorado State. Pretty good big man here who has guard forward positional versatility. I think that he can guard multiple positions. You see the bulk on him as we show you his stats. With Colorado State last year, he really did a bunch of everything. And this is another player who you look at the level of competition and you're like, okay, not the best, but the production is really solid. And if he can knock down some open looks, 19 points per game, 7.5 rebounds, 57% from the field, 44% from three. It's these types of players who I'm looking for the Lakers to target because I do think they can be rotational players in the league. As for Peyton Watson out of UCLA, another player to round out the five here in the 30s, Highly touted coming out of high school, 5-star guy, great athlete, solid defender, has to improve his shot selection as well as his shot making. Needs some time to develop. 3 points per game, less than 36% off the bench. You're kind of buying on his potential and the pedigree there of him being a former 5-star prospect. On our main Chat Sports YouTube channel, myself, Harrison Graham, Will Scott, Marshall Green, Tom Downey, going to be live for both rounds of the NBA draft. Sam Brown is going to be on the 1s and 2s, as is Jack LaRavia. We, as a Chat Sports crew, have put so much work into the NBA draft, and we'll be going live for every single selection tonight, so make sure you join us for the most watched NBA draft coverage on YouTube, trying to get to more than 1 million viewers. It's youtube.com/chatsportstv. Draft targets in the 40s if the board falls this way. Johnny Juzang out of UCLA. A lot of people familiar with him because he played his basketball at the college ranks in the Lakers' backyard. Really nice area of Cali. I got to spend the summer of 2014 in that area. Beautiful. 15.5 points per game, little less than 5 boards, 36% from downtown, 43% shooter. Has to be a little bit more efficient. Josh Minott out of Memphis. So what's interesting is that The Athletic actually has him as a top 15 prospect in this draft class. Somewhat surprising, but maybe he'll be one of those sleepers that gets taken early. Maybe he'll fall into the 40s. J.D. Davison, out of Alabama. Alabama has a couple of guys who I think are going to fall in the second round and could be solid 3-and-D players. For Davison, pretty good ball handler, even better hair. Jalen Williams out of Arkansas, another guy who could be on the board in the 40s here, a forward center, versatile, big, and then Jabari Walker out of Colorado. We already talked about Roddy from Colorado State, Jabari Walker from Colorado. He did work out for the Lakers, and you look at what he did a year ago with the Buffs, 14.5 points per game, nearly a double-double with 9.5 boards, 46% from the field, and sub 35% from downtown. A little bit more consistent, has to clean up his stroke just a little bit from beyond the arc. Crystal ball time here on the Lakers, and it's fitting that crystal ball there is purple because we're talking about the Lakers, right? If the Lakers buy a second-round pick, predict which number they will get. Give me a numerical figure in the comment section right now. And at the end of the day, this is why you subscribe to the channel. In the lead up to the draft, we've had you covered with all of the latest news, rumors, draft profiles, draft rumors, but also free agency starts a week from today. Our offseason coverage here on the channel only getting started. Hit that bell and turn on those notifications as well because we could be going live and we're going to be pushing out a ton of videos here on the Lakers Report. Targets now in the 50s. Keon Ellis. I said there was a couple of Alabama guys who could go in the middle to latter portion of the second round. Keon Ellis, another one of them. Gene Montero out of the G League Elite. Everybody talks about the G League Ignite, but in the G League with the Elite, this guy was a hyper scorer who was very, very inconsistent, does not lack any confidence to let it fly. You look at the 17 points per game, great. You look at 39+% from the field, not great. So kind of a Lou Williams type. You're not sure what you're going to get night in and night out. He'll hit those hot spells, but those cold spells pretty brutal. His decision-making in defensive lapses, sometimes he can be a traffic cone on defense. Alondes Williams out of Wake Forest. Jake LaRavia is the guy who we talked about earlier out of Wake, and that's a player who could sneak into the back half of the first round. Alondes Williams, I do expect him to get selected at some point, his teammate, in the second round. One of my favorite second-round targets, it's Ron Harper Jr. out of Rutgers. His pops played in the league, and when you go back and watch some of these Rutgers games, at 6'6", 245, a fascinating body type, but he's really fun to watch as he kind of reminds you a little bit of Kenneth Lofton to a certain degree because you look at the body and he moves exceptionally well, can handle. What I also love about him, hit a bunch of big shots for Rutgers down the stretch in a bunch of big games, including this past season. Musa Diabate out of Michigan, a forward/center type. Always struggle with the pronunciation there, but what Juwan Howard has been able to do with the Wolverines, I think has been really impressive. Obviously, a couple of deep runs in the NCAA tournament, but you look at the numbers here, out of France, length a little bit raw, 9 points per game, 6 boards, 54% from the field, not really a threat to make it rain from downtown, but Howard has developed a lot of really solid and intriguing NBA draft prospects. He's continued to do that as well. If the Lakers get a pick in round 2, like Rob Pelinka buys a selection and they're able to draft a player or two, name a guy who you want them to draft. It can be somebody who we talked about on today's show. It can be a different person. Either way, let us know if the Lakers are on the clock, who you want them to take. And make sure you subscribe and keep it locked for our main draft coverage, but also draft coverage right here on the Lakers Report.